The weight of the watch on my wrist felt less like a luxury and more like a shackle. My wife, Sarah, gave it to me for my 48th birthday, her eyes shining with what I mistook for love. It was perfect, expensive. A testament, I thought, to 2 decades of shared history. Then I found the inscription, nearly invisible to the naked eye, etched onto the clasp, J to S forever. In that moment, the gears of my life didn't just stop, they shattered. My first instinct was pure, unadulterated rage, a wildfire in my gut. But then, a colder, more calculating thought took its place. She didn't just betray me, she mocked me with a trophy from her lover. You think you know how this ends, a screaming match, a slammed door, a bitter divorce. Think again. What I uncovered next, and what I planned for her, her lover, and their whole sordid world, was something far more intricate. This wasn't just about heartbreak, it was about rewriting the ending. Before diving in, hit that subscribe button and comment below. Have you ever dealt with betrayal? Let's hear your stories. Part 1, The Perfect Gift. The day it all began was my 48th birthday, a Tuesday in October that felt aggressively ordinary. I'd spent the day in a series of back-to-back project management meetings, massaging egos and untangling logistical knots for a software launch that was 6 months behind schedule and $1 million over budget. It was the kind of soul-leeching work that made you appreciate the simple comfort of coming home. And for 22 years, home had been Sarah. When I walked through the door, the house smelled of roasted garlic and rosemary, a scent that immediately unwound the tension in my shoulders. Sarah was in the kitchen, a smudge of flour on her cheek, humming along to some 80s pop station on the radio. She looked beautiful, her auburn hair tied up loosely, a few strands framing her face in the warm light. For a moment, everything was perfect. This was the life I'd built, the quiet stability I'd chosen over and over again. "Hey, birthday boy," she said, her smile reaching her eyes. She wiped her hands on her apron and kissed me, a quick familiar peck that tasted of olive oil. "Don't look in the oven, I'm attempting your favorite chicken." "Attempting?" I laughed, loosening my tie. "You've perfected that recipe." "What's the occasion?" She rolled her eyes playfully. "It's your birthday, you dope. The kids called, by the way. They'll FaceTime you after dinner. They sent your gift already, it's on the table." Our kids, both in college, were good kids. Their gift was a thoughtful, if predictable, collection of craft beers and a gift certificate to my favorite bookstore. We were a family that ran on comfortable predictability, or so I thought. Dinner was wonderful. We talked about my day, about her new pottery class, about the outrageous tuition bills for the kids. The conversation was easy, worn smooth like river stones from years of use. We weren't the fiery, passionate couple we'd been in our 20s, but we were comfortable. A partnership I'd always believed that was enough. I'd sacrificed a lot for this life, turned down a riskier but more lucrative job in another state to stay close to her family, funneled all my energy into being a provider, a steady hand at the rudder. Lately, I'd sensed a distance in her, a restlessness I'd chalked up to empty nest syndrome. I figured we just needed a spark. "I have something for you too," she said after we'd cleared the plates, her voice holding a note of nervous excitement. She disappeared into the bedroom and returned with a small, elegantly wrapped box. It was heavy, substantial. "Sarah, you didn't have to," I said, genuinely touched. "We agreed to keep things simple this year, save for the big anniversary trip we were planning. Just open it, Mark." I peeled back the paper to reveal a dark cherry wood box. Lifting the lid, I saw it nestled on a black velvet cushion, a watch, but not just any watch. It was a Stour T-class chronograph, a gorgeous piece of machinery with a gleaming stainless steel case, a deep blue face, and intricate subdials. It was the kind of watch I'd admire in a magazine but never, ever buy for myself. It was too flashy, too expensive, too not me. "Wow," I breathed, lifting it out. The metal was cool and heavy in my hand. "Sarah, this is incredible. It must have cost a fortune." "You deserve it," she said, her voice soft. She helped me fasten the clasp around my wrist. It felt alien, a statement piece on a man who wore 15-year-old polo shirts. "You work so hard for us. You never get anything for yourself. I wanted you to have something beautiful." I looked from the stunning timepiece on my wrist to my wife's earnest face, and a wave of guilt washed over me. I'd been so wrapped up in my work, so lost in the mundane rhythm of our lives, that I'd let a chasm grow between us. This watch, this extravagant, thoughtful, incredible gift felt like a bridge across that chasm. It was her saying, I see you, I still love you. I pulled her in and hugged her tight, burying my face in her hair. Thank you, I whispered. I love it, I love you. I love you too, she said into my chest. That night, I went to sleep feeling more connected to my wife than I had in years. The watch sat on my nightstand, its luminous hands glowing faintly in the dark, a silent promise of a new chapter. I was a fool. It wasn't a promise, it was a goddamn tombstone. Part 2, a crack in the chrome. For 2 weeks, the watch was a part of me. I wore it everywhere, the unaccustomed weight on my wrist a constant, pleasant reminder of Sarah's gesture. It felt good. It felt like our marriage was back on track. I started making more of an effort, leaving work on time, suggesting date nights, paying her the kind of compliments that had fallen by the wayside over the years. She seemed to respond in kind, her laughter a little lighter, her touch less perfunctory. The dark humor of it all, in retrospect, is that I was living in a beautiful, well-crafted lie, much like the watch itself. The truth came out on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was giving the watch its first proper cleaning, just as the manual instructed. I sat at the kitchen table with a soft cloth and a small bowl of warm, soapy water, the late afternoon sun streaming through the window. I was admiring the craftsmanship, the way the light played off the beveled edges of the case. I ran the cloth over the deployment clasp, polishing the brushed steel, and that's when my thumb snagged on something. I squinted, holding it closer to the light. There, on the inside of the clasp, so small it was almost part of the texture of the metal, were 2 letters, separated by a stylized ampersand. J and S. My first thought was a flare of irrational jealousy. Who the hell is J? Sarah's maiden name was Peterson. Her middle name was Lynn. My name is Mark. No J's in our immediate orbit. Maybe it was a jeweler's mark, a model number. I tried to rationalize it, to find an innocent explanation that would allow my perfect world to remain intact. But a cold, slithering dread had already begun to coil in my stomach. J and S. I went to my laptop, my hands trembling slightly, and typed Stour T-Glass chronograph inscription into the search bar. Nothing. They didn't come with standard inscriptions. My heart started hammering against my ribs. This was custom. Someone had paid to have this put here. For the next hour, I was a man possessed. I descended into a digital rabbit hole I never knew existed. I started with her phone. For years, we'd had an open-door policy with our electronics. No secrets, but in the last 6 months, she'd started guarding it, angling the screen away from me, snapping it shut when I entered a room. At the time, I dismissed it as a newfound desire for privacy. Now it felt like a locked door I needed to kick down. Her password was still the same, our anniversary date. The irony was a bitter pill. I opened her texts, my breath held tight in my chest. I scrolled back past messages from her sister, from our kids, from friends at her pottery class. And then I found it, a name I didn't recognize, Julian. The thread was long, stretching back months. The early messages were innocent enough, chatter about pottery, shared jokes, but the tone shifted. The language became more intimate, laced with innuendo and flattery. Julian, you looked amazing in class today. That blue dress, wow. Sarah, stop it, you'll make me blush. Julian, I'm serious, you're a work of art. My stomach churned. I kept scrolling, a voyeur to the destruction of my own life. The messages grew more explicit, detailing secret lunches, clandestine meetings. They talked about me. Julian, does he suspect anything? Sarah, Mark, no, he's sweet, but he's oblivious, buried in his work. He hasn't really seen me in years. That sentence hit me like a physical blow. Oblivious. She saw my hard work, my sacrifices, not as a foundation for our family, but as a cover for her betrayal. Then I found the text from my birthday week. Julian, did you give him the watch? Sarah, I did, he loved it. Julian, God, that's so hot, him wearing my gift to you. Does he have any idea? Sarah, not a clue. It feels wicked. I love it. The screen blurred, a roaring sound filled my ears. It wasn't just an affair. It was a game. A sick, twisted performance where I was the unwitting clown, parading around with their trophy on my wrist. J and S, Julian and Sarah. The watch wasn't a regift, it was worse. It was a passed-down insult, a symbol of their shared secret, a middle finger to my entire existence. I put the phone down, my hands slick with sweat. I looked at the watch still sitting on the polishing cloth. It wasn't beautiful anymore. It was grotesque, a monument to my own stupidity. The love and gratitude I'd felt just moments before curdled into something hot and acidic. Rage. Pure, undiluted rage that was so intense it felt like I was choking on it. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the manicured lawn of our suburban home, the symbol of our shared life. Everything I was looking at, the house, the garden Sarah was so proud of, the very air I was breathing, felt contaminated. The foundation of my world hadn't just cracked, it had been dynamited. Part 3, The Echo Chamber of a Broken Heart. The hours after the discovery were a blur of silent, simmering fury. Sarah was out at one of her pottery nights, which I now knew was a laughable euphemism. The quiet of the house was deafening. Every ticking clock, every creak of the floorboards seemed to mock my newfound status as the fool. I walked from room to room, touching the furniture, the picture frames, the artifacts of our life together. Here we were, smiling on a beach in Hawaii, 10 years younger and blissfully ignorant. Here were the kids, macaroni art school projects, still tacked to a corkboard in the kitchen. Each memory was now tainted, a scene from a movie where I was the only one who didn't know the ending. My mind became an echo chamber. Her words from the texts bounced around my skull. He's sweet, but he's oblivious. I replayed the last year in my head, searching for clues I'd missed. The sudden obsession with the gym, which had transformed her comfortable, middle-aged body into something leaner, harder. The new, expensive lingerie I'd naively thought was for me. The late nights at the studio, the hushed phone calls she'd take in the other room. The signs were all there, flashing like neon warnings, and I had driven right past them, a man too focused on the road ahead to see the cliff's edge. The rage was a physical thing, a hot pressure behind my eyes. I wanted to smash things. I imagined sweeping every plate from the kitchen shelves, shattering them on the floor. I pictured myself taking a hammer to her precious pottery kiln in the garage, but I didn't. Some cold, rational part of my brain held me back, whispering that a messy, emotional outburst was exactly what they'd expect from the oblivious husband. It would give her the moral high ground, a way to paint me as unhinged and herself as the victim. Then came the self-doubt, a worm burrowing through the anger. Was it my fault? Had I been so buried in work that I'd let our connection wither? I thought back to our early days, the easy passion, the way we could talk for hours about nothing. We'd been a team. But somewhere along the line, the passion had cooled to companionship, and the companionship had degraded into routine. Had I made her feel unseen, unloved? For a moment, I allowed myself to feel a pang of empathy for her. Maybe she was just lonely. Maybe this Julian character had offered her an escape from the monotony. This line of thought, this potential for a nuanced, balanced perspective, was a dangerous one. It was the path of the doormat, the understanding cuckold. The image of her text message flashed in my mind. It feels wicked. I love it. And the empathy evaporated, replaced by ice. This wasn't a desperate cry for help. This was a thrill ride at my expense. I sat in my leather armchair, the watch in my hand, and debated my next move. Path A, the immediate confrontation. I could wait for her to walk through the door and unleash hell. Throw the watch at her, show her the texts, scream and yell until the neighbors called the cops. It would be cathartic, a release of the immense pressure building in my chest. But what then? She would deny, deflect, gaslight. She'd call me crazy for going through her phone. It would be her word against mine, a chaotic mess that would end with her storming out, free to play the victim. There was no strategy in that, no justice. Path B, the long game. The alternative began to form, a shadowy idea at the edges of my consciousness. What if I said nothing? What if I played the part she'd cast me in, the loving, oblivious husband? I could watch her. I could gather more information. I could learn everything about this Julian. The thought was nauseating, requiring a level of self-control I wasn't sure I possessed. But the potential payoff, the thought of orchestrating their downfall, of choosing the time and place for the truth to detonate, was deeply, darkly appealing. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about taking back control. They had made me a pawn in their game. It was time I started playing my own. The internal monologue raged on. One part of me, the heartbroken husband, just wanted his wife back, wanted this all to be a horrible nightmare. Another part, a colder, more pragmatic entity I hadn't met before, was already calculating angles and weighing outcomes. I looked down at the watch in my hand. It was a beautiful, intricate machine, full of tiny, moving parts all working in concert towards a single purpose, to mark the passage of time. My time with Sarah, the woman I knew, was over. This watch would now mark the time until my retribution. I closed my hand around it, the metal cool and hard against my palm. The decision was made, path B it was. The curtain was rising on my own little performance. Part 4, The Art of the Smile. When Sarah came home an hour later, I was on the couch, reading a book, the watch secured firmly on my wrist. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but I forced my face into a mask of placid calm. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head. She breezed in, smelling of clay and a perfume I didn't recognize, a floral, musky scent that was far more seductive than her usual light, citrusy spray. It was his scent on her, I realized, a brand of another man. The thought was a fresh stab of the knife. Hey, honey. Sorry I'm late, we were trying a new glazing technique and I lost track of time, she lied, easily and without a flicker of hesitation. It was a master class in casual deception. No worries, I said, looking up from my book and giving her the warmest, most genuine smile I could muster. It felt like stretching a muscle I'd never used before. How did it go? Oh, you know. Messy but fun. She came over and kissed my forehead. I had to fight every instinct to recoil. I see you're still wearing your gift. I haven't taken it off, I said, holding up my wrist so the light caught the face. I get compliments on it everywhere I go. You have amazing taste. I watched her face closely. For a split second, I saw it, a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it guilt, or was it the thrill she'd texted Julian about, the private joke they shared, now playing out right in front of her? She recovered quickly, her expression softening into one of wifely affection. I'm so glad you love it, Mark. The next few weeks were the most surreal of my life. I became an actor in my own home, playing the role of the devoted husband with an almost manic intensity. I brought her coffee in bed. I left little notes in her car. I booked a weekend trip to a bed-and breakfast we hadn't visited in years. On the surface, I was the husband she'd probably complained to Julian that I'd stopped being. Beneath the surface, I was a detective. Every night after she fell asleep, I would slip out of bed and continue my investigation. I learned to use software that recovered deleted texts and photos from her phone's cache. The sheer volume of their correspondence was staggering. Hundreds of messages a day, filled with private jokes, sexual fantasies, and plans for their future. They weren't just sleeping together, they were building a life in the shadows of mine. I learned his full name, Julian Croft. A quick search revealed he was a moderately successful, intensely smug real estate developer, specializing in luxury condos. His company website was plastered with photos of him in tailored suits, pointing at blueprints or laughing with clients. He was handsome in a generic, overconfident way, the kind of guy who probably thought he was God's gift to women. He was also married. His wife, a stern-looking blonde named Catherine, was a prominent charity fundraiser. They were a local power couple. This added a delicious new layer of complexity to the game. My days were a masterclass in compartmentalization. At work, I was the efficient project manager, calmly steering my team toward deadlines. At home, I was the adoring husband, smiling at my wife across the dinner table while silently cataloging every lie that passed her lips. And in the dead of night, I was a vengeful specter, piecing together the evidence that would eventually bring their world crashing down. The dark humor of the situation was my only solace. I started wearing the watch to bed. One morning, Sarah noticed, "You even sleep in that thing," she asked with a laugh as she buttoned her blouse for work. "I don't want to be without it for a second," I said, my voice deadpan. "It's a reminder of how much you love me." Her smile faltered for just an instant. She thought I was being sentimental. The truth was, the cold weight of the watch against my skin in the dark was a reminder of my purpose. It was my focus, my mission statement. It kept the rage from boiling over into a premature, clumsy confrontation. It kept me disciplined. It kept me sane. Part 5, Gaslight and Gasoline. My campaign of renewed affection was having an interesting effect on Sarah. Instead of being grateful, she seemed agitated. My presence, my attention, was an inconvenience to her secret life. My questions about her day, once a welcome sign of interest, were now an interrogation. She was on edge and it was making her sloppy. One evening I asked, "So, how's Julian in your pottery class? You mention him a lot, he seems like a character." I kept my tone breezy, as if I were asking about the weather. She froze, her hand hovering over her wine glass. "Julian, oh, he's fine, a bit of a loudmouth to be honest. Why do you ask?" "No reason, just seems like you've made a new friend." "He's not my friend, Mark. He's just a guy in my class," she snapped, a little too forcefully. "Why are you so obsessed with my pottery class all of a sudden?" This was the gaslighting I had been expecting. She was turning my casual interest into an accusation of jealousy, painting me as the nighty, suspicious husband. It was a classic tactic of the guilty. Instead of getting angry, I found it fascinating. I was a scientist observing a specimen. "I'm not obsessed," I said calmly, taking a sip of my own wine. "I'm just interested in your life, Sarah, that's all." Her defiance only added gasoline to my quiet, slow-burning fire. A few nights later, she thought I was asleep and took a call on the back porch. I had already installed a discreet audio recording app on the home tablet, which I'd accidentally left on the patio table earlier. The next morning, over coffee, I put in my earbuds and listened. It was Julian. Her voice was a low, seductive whisper. "I can't talk long," she murmured. "He's been so clingy lately, it's driving me crazy." "Is that so?" Julian's voice was slick with arrogance. "Maybe he's finally realized he's about to lose the best thing that ever happened to him." "Don't," she sighed, but there was no force behind it. "It's just, he's everywhere. Asking questions, wanting to do things, I feel like I can't breathe." "So leave him," Julian said, his voice dropping. "Come be with me, we could be happy, Sarah." "It's not that simple," she whispered. "The house, the money, a divorce would be so messy." My blood ran cold. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was a practical calculation. She wasn't staying with me out of love or even guilt. She was staying for the lifestyle I provided, the assets it would be messy to divide. She was complaining to her lover about my affection being an inconvenience, while her lover was coaching her on how to best handle her exit strategy. This recording was a game changer. It was pure, unadulterated proof of her contempt. My resolve hardened from steel into diamond. This wouldn't just be about exposing an affair. This would be about making sure she walked away with nothing but the shame she so richly deserved. Part 6, An Unlikely Alliance. I knew I couldn't carry this alone anymore. The weight of the secret, the constant performance, was starting to wear me down. I needed an ally, someone on the outside who could offer perspective and perhaps information. The obvious choice was my best friend, but I hesitated. This was too personal, too humiliating. Then I thought of Carla, Sarah's younger sister. Carla and I had always had a strange relationship. She was 5 years younger than Sarah, sharper, more cynical, and she'd never fully bought into the perfect suburban life her sister had curated. We debonded over the years at excruciatingly boring family functions, sharing sarcastic asides about our in-laws. She saw through the polite facades, and I had a feeling she saw through her sister, too. It was a huge risk. If she sided with Sarah, my entire plan could be exposed. But my gut told me Carla's loyalty was to the truth, not necessarily to blood. I called her and asked if she was free for a drink, inventing a flimsy excuse about needing advice on an anniversary gift for Sarah. We met at a quiet bar downtown. After 10 minutes of small talk, I took a deep breath and laid it all out. I told her about the watch, the inscription, the texts, the late-night phone calls. I played her the recording from the back porch. She listened intently, her expression shifting from surprise to a kind of weary resignation. She didn't seem shocked by the affair itself, but by the depth of the deceit. When the recording finished, she was silent for a long moment, staring into her gin and tonic. "That bastard," she finally said, but she wasn't looking at me. "She's always been like this." "What do you mean?" "Sarah, she loves the idea of being the perfect wife in the perfect life, but she gets bored," Carla explained, her voice low. "She craves drama, excitement. When you two were first married, it was great, but once things settled down, once you became reliable, she started looking for cracks, little ways to stir the pot. This is the biggest pot she's ever stirred, that's all." It was a devastatingly accurate assessment. It reframed my entire marriage. I wasn't just the oblivious husband. I was the stable, boring backdrop against which she could paint her thrilling dramas. "And him," Carla continued, her eyes flashing with anger. "Julian Croft, I've met him. He and his wife Catherine are donors for the nonprofit I work for. He's a professional sleazebag. Hits on every woman in the room right in front of his wife. Catherine just stands there with this frozen smile. It's pathetic. This was gold. Carla not only validated my sanity, but she also gave me an inside track. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her gaze steady. "I have a plan," I said, "but it's going to be brutal, and I need it to be perfect. The anniversary dinner is in 3 weeks." Carla leaned forward, a grim smile playing on her lips. "Tell me everything. If she's going to burn her life down, let's at least make sure she doesn't take you with her. And if we can singe Julian Croft's eyebrows in the process, all the better." I had my ally. The game had just leveled up. Part 7, winding the clock for the last time. With Carla as my co-conspirator, the plan evolved from a simple exposé into a multi-pronged surgical strike. She was my inside source, feeding me details about Julian's life, his business dealings, and most importantly, his wife. Catherine Croft, it turned out, was the key. According to Carla, Catherine was from old money and held the purse strings in their marriage. Julian's development company had been largely funded by her family's trust. He was the flashy frontman, but she was the power behind the throne. His affair wasn't just a betrayal of his marriage, it was a massive financial risk. If Catherine divorced him and pulled her funding, his little empire would crumble. My mission was now twofold: expose Sarah and neutralize Julian. I spent my nights digging into Julian Croft's business. Public records are a beautiful thing. I found building permits, investor reports, and a few pending lawsuits over shoddy construction. More interestingly, I found that his latest luxury condo project, the Azure, was massively over-leveraged and behind schedule. He needed a huge infusion of capital, which I was willing to bet was coming from his wife's family trust. The plan began to crystallize. It wasn't enough to just tell Catherine. I had to show her in a way she couldn't ignore or deny. I created a new, anonymous email account. I started compiling a dossier, a digital package of irrefutable proof. I included screenshots of the most damning texts between Sarah and Julian, not just the sexual ones, but the ones where they mocked me, and the ones where they discussed their future together. I included the audio recording of their phone call. I also included photos. I had hired a private investigator for one day. It cost a fortune, but the results were worth it. He'd captured crystal-clear shots of Sarah and Julian kissing in his car during one of her pottery nights. The final piece of the puzzle was the watch. It was the inciting incident, the symbol of their arrogance. I took high-resolution photos of the watch and a close-up of the J and S inscription. I arranged all of this into a clean, professional presentation. The subject line of the email I was preparing to send to Catherine Croft read, "A matter concerning your husband and the Azure project." I would tie his infidelity directly to his financial and professional recklessness. The stage was almost set. All that was left was the performance itself. Part 8, the anniversary dinner. I chose the restaurant with meticulous care. Viver, an absurdly expensive Italian place known for its discreet service and hushed, reverent atmosphere. It was a place where people went to see and be seen. It was, as Carla had confirmed, one of Julian and Catherine Croft's favorite spots. I booked a prime table for 8 for our 23rd wedding anniversary. The guest list was small but potent. Me, Sarah, her parents, Carla, my best friend Tom and his wife, and one other couple, the Gallaghers, who were our oldest friends. It was a gathering of the people who represented the bedrock of our shared life. On the day of the dinner, I sent the email to Catherine Croft from a library computer, routing it through 3 different proxy servers. The email was concise. It laid out the evidence and ended with a simple sentence: "He will be dining with my wife tonight at Viver at 8:00 p.m. I believe you will find their interaction illuminating. I suggest you observe from the bar." I didn't schedule the email to send until 7:45 p.m., giving her just enough time to get there, but not enough time to warn Julian. When I got home, Sarah was getting ready. She was wearing a stunning new dress, a deep emerald green that complemented her hair. She looked radiant. "You look beautiful," I said, and for the first time in months I meant it. She was a beautiful woman, a beautiful, venomous snake. "You're not so bad yourself," she said, adjusting my tie. "You've been so sweet lately, Mark. I feel like we're finally getting back to us." "Me too," I said, my voice perfectly even. Tonight is going to be a night we'll never forget. On the drive to the restaurant, she rested her hand on my thigh. It took every ounce of my willpower not to flinch. I just smiled, my eyes on the road, my mind on the countdown. Tick-tock, Part 9, the final countdown. The atmosphere at Viver was exactly as I'd planned. A low hum of conversation, the clinking of silverware, the soft glow of candlelight. Our table was in the center of the room, a perfect stage. Sarah was in her element, laughing and holding court, the gracious hostess of a life she was actively trying to dismantle. At 8:05 p.m. I saw her. Catherine Croft walked in alone. She was elegant and icy, dressed in a black Chanel suit that screamed money and power. She didn't look at our table. She went straight to the bar, ordered a drink, and took a seat that gave her a clear, unobstructed view of us. Julian was nowhere to be seen. Perfect. The appetizers came and went, the wine flowed. Sarah's parents told a long, rambling story about their first car. I played my part, laughing at the right moments, topping off wine glasses, the perfect host. All the while, I kept the watch on my wrist in plain sight, catching the light as I gestured. Finally, the main courses were served. This was my cue. I stood up, tapping my water glass with a fork. The table quieted. "I'd like to propose a toast," I began, my voice steady and clear. Every eye was on me. Out of the corner of my vision, I could see Catherine Croft at the bar, watching, her posture rigid. 23 years, I said, looking directly at Sarah. An incredible journey. We've built a life, raised two amazing kids, and created a home. And through it all, Sarah, you have been my rock. Her eyes glistened with tears. Her parents beamed. And you've always been so thoughtful, I continued, my voice taking on a new, harder edge. Take my birthday, for example. Sarah gave me this incredible gift. I held up my wrist, turning it so everyone could see the watch. A Stour chronograph, a truly beautiful timepiece, a symbol of time, of loyalty, of the precious moments we share. Sarah's smile was nailed in place, but I could see a flicker of confusion in her eyes. She told me she wanted me to have something beautiful, and she was right. But the most beautiful thing about this watch isn't the craftsmanship or the blue face. It's a tiny, secret detail. A little personal touch that really shows how much she was thinking of me. I unclasped the watch from my wrist. The table was dead silent. I could feel the tension ratcheting up. "Right here," I said, walking around the table to Sarah's side and holding the clasp up for her parents to see. On the inside of the clasp, there's an inscription. It says, J and S forever. Her father squinted. "J and S, what does that stand for?" I turned my gaze back to my wife. Her face had gone chalk white. The color drained from her cheeks as if a plug had been pulled. "I was wondering the same thing," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, but it carried in the silent room. And after a little digging, I found out. The J stands for Julian, as in Julian Croft. The S, of course, stands for Sarah. It was a gift from him to her, a token of their relationship. A collective gasp went through the table. Sarah's mother put a hand to her mouth. "But don't worry," I said, my voice ringing with a cold, triumphant clarity as I addressed the whole table. "I don't want to cause a scene. I just wanted to thank my wife publicly for giving me a gift that finally allowed me to see the truth. The texts, the photos, the secret lunches, it all makes sense now." I placed the watch gently on the table in front of her empty plate. "You can give this back to him," I said softly. "I believe he owes his wife an explanation." As if on cue, Julian Croft strode into the restaurant, a smug smile on his face, clearly expecting to meet Sarah. His eyes landed on our table, on Sarah's horrified face, and then on his wife, who was now standing up at the bar, her face a mask of cold fury. His confident swagger evaporated. He looked like a cornered animal. Catherine walked over to him, her steps measured and deliberate. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply said, in a voice that cut through the silence, "Julian." "We're done." She turned and walked out of the restaurant without a backward glance. Julian stared after her, then at Sarah, then at me. His face was a mess of confusion and panic. I just gave him a small, tight smile and a little nod. Checkmate Part 10, Shards of Time. The fallout at the restaurant was a tableau of silent horror. Sarah sat frozen, her face ashen. Her parents were staring at her, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and profound disappointment. My friends looked like they wanted to be anywhere else on earth. I threw a few $100 bills on the table to cover the meal and more. "I think we're finished here." I said to the room at large. Then I turned and walked out, leaving her to sit in the wreckage she had built. I didn't look back. The drive home was silent. She'd taken a cab, and I was grateful for the solitude. The rage and adrenaline of the confrontation had subsided, leaving behind a vast, hollow emptiness. But it wasn't a painful emptiness. It was clean. It was the feeling of a space that had been cleared of toxic clutter. When she finally arrived home, I was in the living room packing a few of her things into a suitcase. "Mark, please," she started, her voice trembling. "Let me explain." "Explain what, Sarah?" I asked, not even looking at her. "Explain the lies, the watch, explain the phone call where you complained that my affection was suffocating you while you planned your future with him. There's nothing to explain, there's only the truth." "I was unhappy," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You weren't there." "I was always there," I said, finally turning to face her. The anger was gone, replaced by a deep, weary finality. "I was working to pay for this house, for the kids' college, for your pottery studio. I was the reliable, oblivious husband you mocked to your lover. You weren't unhappy with your life, Sarah. You were just bored with it. And you used me as your emotional collateral for a cheap thrill." I zipped the suitcase and placed it by the door. "I've spoken to a lawyer. The papers will be served tomorrow. I'm keeping the house. You can go stay with Julian." "Oh, wait," I feigned a moment of realization. "That might be difficult now that his wife is likely seizing all his assets. I guess that's what you call a messy situation." The cruelty of my words hung in the air, but I felt no remorse. It was simply a statement of fact. In the months that followed, I learned the full extent of the fallout. Carla kept me updated. Catherine Croft had indeed frozen Julian's access to their joint funds and initiated divorce proceedings that would strip him of his company. His Azure project collapsed into bankruptcy. He was ruined. Sarah ended up moving into a small apartment, forced to get a real job for the first time in 20 years. Her parents were supporting her, but their relationship was strained. Our friends had all sided with me. She was an island. For my part, I found a strange sense of liberation. After the initial pain and anger faded, I was left with peace. The house was quieter, but it was mine. I reconnected with hobbies I'd let slide, started hiking again, and spent weekends visiting my kids, who were shocked but ultimately supportive. I was rediscovering the man I'd been before he was subsumed into the identity of Sarah's husband. Sometimes I wonder if a different path would have been better, a quiet divorce, a less explosive ending, perhaps. But the way they had mocked me, the sheer, unadulterated arrogance of the watch, demanded a response in kind. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my own narrative. It was about taking the symbol of my humiliation and turning it into the instrument of my freedom. I didn't get an apology, and I didn't get the years of my life back, but I got myself back. And in the end, that was a resolution far more valuable than any watch. If this story hit home, like and subscribe for more gripping tales of love and betrayal. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you forgive or seek revenge? Was my response calculated justice or a step too far? I read every single one. Check out the next video popping up now for another twist-filled saga.